We're just waiting for the webcam to go on, to be turned on, and we will start.
Wait to be on camera.
Well, good afternoon to all. Welcome to the Wilson Center. I am Paulo Sotero, Director of the Brazil Institute at the Wilson Center. I would like to, on behalf of the Brazil Institute, of the Latin American program of the Wilson Center, of the Environmental Change and Security program of the Wilson Center, to welcome you all here. Those two programs have associated and have joined us with the Brazil Institute to promote, to organize this event. And I'm very grateful to Cindy Arnson and to Jeff DeBelco, the directors of the Latin American program and the Environmental Change and Security program, for their help. As some of you may know, the Wilson Center celebrates the 28th President of the United States. He was a scholar before he became a politician. And he used to say, after leaving Princeton University, where he was the president for many years, and after he became President of the United States in 1913, that the doers, policymakers, politicians, and the thinkers, the people from the academic world, the people who study policy, should be in contact. So when this institution was formed, was created in '68, it became a living memorial to President Wilson to do precisely that, to put the thinkers and the doers together in the hopes that this will promote better public policy. And this is what we will try to do here today, talking to about a subject that is very important for Brazil. I wanted to tell you a brief story of this event. One of the first people to suggest this to me was Gustavo Fonseca, when he was at the Conservation International in the month of September of 2006, when I joined the Wilson Center in this position. Later on, with many talks I had with Tom Lovejoy, who I invited, and I'm very happy he accepted to be a member of the advisory council of the Wilson Center, of the Brazil Institute particularly. But then, a few months ago, Marcia Cotta from Conservation International called me and suggested that we hold an event to discuss this report that Tim Killeen had written about the impact of infrastructure projects in the Amazon region in Brazil and neighboring countries. I read the report, immediately called my dear friend Mauro Marcondes, who is the coordinator of the IIRSA, the Initiative for Integration of Infrastructure Projects in South America, at the IDB, and asked Mauro, what do you think? I like this very much, this report, and I'd like to hear your opinion. And he said, Paulo, it's a very critical report. It's a very good report. It's one worth debating. And I would advise you to, yes, do this promote this event and invite me, I would like to come and speak. And that's what we are going to do here for the next 5.5 hours. There will be lunch, and there will be booze at the end, because, as you may know, we will conclude this event by opening an art exhibit of pictures of the Amazon, the good, the marvelous, the bad, and the ugly, that were produced by O Estado de São Paulo, a newspaper that you may know I worked for a little bit more than, I think, 17 years, until 2006. O Estado published recently a very important report about the time Conservation International was publicizing Tim's report. O Estado came out with a very interesting report that you see outside, bringing the discussion about the Amazon really in a big way to the Brazilian public just before the Bali conference in Indonesia. So it is with great satisfaction that we hold this event. I would like to thank very much all the participants, the people that came, some from Brazil, to agree to participate and to debate this with you. And I would like to pass the floor to Tom Lovejoy, whom you all know. I will not introduce them. Their bios are in the folders that you have. But just about Tom Lovejoy, because he is very special to the Brazil Institute, to me personally, and to, I think, all Brazilians that care about preservation of the environment. Tom is the person that has been educating Americans and Brazilians about biodiversity, about this absolute wonderful asset that we have in our country. And I'm very glad that he accepted to preside this session and moderate the debate. Thank you, Tom.
So, infrastructure integration and environmental preservation in the Amazon is the topic of our afternoon. And I want to get to that as quickly as we can. So I don't intend to sort of make a long series of remarks prefatory to the whole exercise. But I would just like to make a few points very quickly. The experience of road projects in the Amazon can be summed up in a way by what I found when I first arrived in the Amazon in 1965, at which point there was only one road in the entire Amazon. And people in Belém were remarking with great astonishment about how people just were coming up that road and spontaneously colonizing and deforesting. Well, it's now 43 years later, of course. There are many more roads. There's been a lot of deforestation, a lot of environmental destruction. And on the other side of the ledger, there has been an extraordinary amount of positive initiatives, adding up to something on the order of 40% of the Brazilian Amazon being under some form of protection. A quite remarkable achievement. Something we never would have dared to dream of even 20 years ago. But in a sense, this whole story is one of a race to the finish line between the forces of conservation, which always includes the possibility of use of resources as opposed to their destruction, and unintended consequences of infrastructure and other forms of development. So that's the topic on the table this afternoon, sort of multiplied up to a scale which we've never seen before. General experience has been that spontaneous colonization and deforestation and all kinds of economic forces that nobody quite sort of foresaw follow road construction wherever it has taken place, sometimes in a wildly uncontrolled way, as in Rondonia, and in other instances in, shall we say, a more measured way. And we're talking, of course, not just about Brazil. We're talking about the entire Amazon. As I understand it, there are 3 road projects underway or planned in Amazonian Peru, connecting it to Brazil and to the Pacific coast. So there's a lot on the table here, and the issue is important nationally in Brazil, in the sense that, and I'm sure Carlos Nobre will touch on this, one of Brazil's great scientists, in the sense that a significant portion of the rainfall in parts of Brazil south of the Amazon come from the Amazon, depend on the Amazon being a forest, maintaining a hydrological cycle, and clearly have important economic implications for the future of some of Brazil's amazing agro-industry and some of Brazil's important hydropower installations. And it is important internationally in the sense of the relationship between forests to climate change. Let's just throw out the following number as a way to highlight its significance. Were the Amazon to be completely deforested from its current state, that is equivalent to about 15 years of annual increase of greenhouse gases, net increase in the atmosphere. So there are big continental scale ecological issues here. There are global scale ones, and of course there is the marvel of the biodiversity of the Amazon, surely the greatest repository of biodiversity on Earth. And so as we consider the IIRSA project, which we'll hear about in some detail, I would just like to make the point, A, that this is a project which is continental in scale. This is not a single highway or a single hydrovia or any other of the pieces that are in there. This is intended to bring about integration in South America. It in itself, integration, that is a very logical thing to be pursuing. The issue is, can it be done in a way that will maintain these enormously important environmental values? And the chair of the Blue Ribbon panel on environment for the Inter-American Development Bank, Bruce Babbitt, is here. And I'm just going to repeat one of the points that panel has made with respect to IIRSA, which is, because it is continental in scale, one should not pursue the understanding of the environmental impact by just looking at all the pieces. Because when you add up all the pieces, it becomes something much more powerful economically and in other ways. It's sort of like, when the last piece of track was put in the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States, all kinds of things became possible, whereas each sort of piece of track being laid down did not seem to be particularly significant. So these are the issues in front of us, and I'm delighted to ask Gustavo Fonseca to say a few words in introducing Tim. Gustavo, as you know, for many years was the guiding light for program at Conservation International, and is playing a similar role at the moment in the Global Environment Facility. Gustavo.
Thank you. 1 second. Thank you, Tom. It's a great pleasure to be here and have the honor to introduce the study that Tim Killeen has just concluded, which is the topic of this session here. It's particularly rewarding for me because the first time that I was really exposed to this particular issue was through someone who's considered to be a development visionary in Brazil, Eliezer Batista, maybe it was 10 years ago, when he called me to his office and he showed me a map with lines crisscrossing the entire South America, a study that he was working on, commissioned by the Cooperación Andina de Fomento, and had some resources from the World Business Council on sustainable development, trying to integrate energy, power lines, roads, hydrovias, ports, and so forth. And he asked me the question, can we do all this without, basically destroying all the natural resource base of South America? So that's a high call, but in the course of that assessment, the great, I think, leap forward was that resulted in a book chapter. But the great lesson out of that is that we cannot look at those infrastructure projects on a case-by-case basis because the issue is really systemic. The challenge is much bigger than that goes beyond, let's say, environmental impact assessments on a project-by-project basis. So that was a very interesting conclusion. And it was not until, maybe a couple of years ago that, talking to Tim Killeen at Conservation International while I was still there, that the idea to take this forward came about. And so it's a great pleasure to see that this study is out. And this study is really has a catastrophic title, The Perfect Storm, but the title's message is, in my view, not devastating enough to really label the threat that this region currently is undergoing. Of all types. The Amazon has resisted basically for over 500 years to all sorts of potential threats, including hydropower development during the 70s and 80s, the Trans-Amazon Highway. But it was not until the Polo Noroeste program made evident that the region was indeed fragile and could change very rapidly that the dynamics really changed, and the realization of the threat to the place was really consolidated. The projects that are associated with IIRSA may now change this immense natural wealth of the region really irreversibly. And as horrible as it may sound, the region will change. The region, as a matter of fact, has been changing rapidly. And the real question is whether it can change in a way that the side effects to this natural richness will not impede future generations from enjoying it economically and for their overall human development potential. The other certainty in relation to the Amazon, in addition to change, is that it will become more and more valuable as the conditions in other parts of the world become worse and worse for the biodiversity and for other benefits provided by ecosystems. So scarcity alone will drive this value up. Therefore, efforts to conserve this vital and strategic portions of this region will have major payoffs into the future. So this study was intended to review and revitalize this dialogue about conservation and development in the Amazon. And the central theme and the motivation for the study was really looking at the IIRSA because it was an evolving concept then, and now it's been recognized as an operational framework by the development agencies involved in this. It's rapidly becoming an organizing principle behind these physical links between among South American countries, highways, hydrovias, etc. And the study looks at objectively at these issues by examining the likely changes that will bring about the region. It's not, however, intended at all to be an anti-IIRSA study. And it quite boldly, and I think quite courageously on the part of Tim, it actually makes IIRSA even sound visionary from a number of perspectives. A vision that could actually promote cultural exchange and stimulate economic growth. One of the hypotheses is that regional integration can offset some of the harsher aspects of globalization and can provide an alternative to the natural resource extraction model that has been in the Amazon, the boom and bust cycles caused by over-reliance on agricultural commodities and so forth. So IIRSA may actually become a very interesting opportunity to change the paradigm in the direction of economic growth and poverty reduction with an ingredient for future well-being in South America. So the document is really provokes us to think along those lines. So it's not a defensive document, it's one that really moves, again, very courageously into areas that haven't been, and proposals that haven't been before ventilated, at least in the conservation community, in the way that Tim has done it. He also highlights the experiences about participatory democracy and how that aspect of South America evolution has permitted the examination of these infrastructure investments and has shown that they can be modified, they can be improved in response to these concerns by society. And the study is also very interesting in proposing to study the linkages between different aspects, for instance, between climate change and what's happening with fires in the Amazon, deforestation, patterns of precipitation, forest fragmentation, what that triggers in turn the loss of biodiversity, irreplaceable biodiversity. So just to name a few of these linkages that Tim has explored very well. To conclude, that South America contains the largest expanse of pristine tropical forests remaining globally. And it's also largely irreplaceable. Just to give you some numbers, 40,000 plant species are believed to occur in the Amazon, even though not all of them have been described yet, but 30,000 of these should be unique to the region. These are endemic species. If they are lost there, if they're lost from the region, they're going to be lost globally. There are about 500 mammal species, 40% of which are, again, only occurring in the Amazon. Likewise, 1,300 birds, 20% of them are endemic. Frogs, and if we extrapolate what frogs, the numbers for frogs for insects, frogs, we have about 400 frog species described for the Amazon, and 85% of them are unique to the region. So this is a unique ecosystem. Freshwater fish, which is in a lot of cases the staple for local communities, there are about, it's estimated that 9,000 freshwater fish species may occur in the Amazon, of which only 3,000, about 3,000 have been described so far, and which constitutes 30% of the entire freshwater fauna known in the world. So this feature must be recognized as the foundation for development and one of the region's principal comparative advantages. International institutions like the one that I work for, the Global Environment Facility, which is the largest funding mechanism dedicated to the global commons, must be part of this dialogue. So far, we have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in Amazonian countries for biodiversity conservation objectives and also for freshwater conservation. But this is just a little drop on the ocean of this perfect storm. We need to take a more holistic approach in our own investments, meaning GEF, in this region in order to achieve and influence much broader outcomes. So we need to be smarter, and this study would also be highly influential in the way that we look at our own investments. So this publication is really bound to become an influential reference for these audiences, not only ours, but locally and regionally, in order to get them joining together for our common effort to really save the Amazon. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and start here. I'd like to start by thanking Paolo for organizing the event and giving us the opportunity to share the study with such an interesting community of individuals. I'm very flattered to be able to sit here with other distinguished individuals and particularly Gustavo, who tasked me the study. I mean, the information in that study is really the result of hundreds of people who've done research in biodiversity, conservation, ecosystem services, economics, social issues, and so it's a literature review that I think tries to bring it all together in a coherent way. And the person responsible for this is Gustavo Fonseca. He tasked it to me. He was my boss at that time at Conservation International, and he's expressed his concern, I think, in a very eloquent way about the future of the Amazon. And so he called me into his office one day and he said, "Tim, you need to do this particular study." And I said about it, and it took a couple of years to do, and it's been vetted through our various departments, and so it kind of represents conservation's institutional thinking about the Amazon and the way we can do it. Perhaps it carries a kind of a particular point of view that's unique to me, but I think it's also an institutional vision as well. So I'll move to the podium here. The title, I've been criticized a lot for the title. Some people think it's too negative. Other people think it's too Hollywood. It just kind of occurred to me when I was writing it, and it came out onto the paper. And it's it's an analogy. Obviously, it refers to the climatological phenomena that when you have certain climatic or weather conditions, meteorological conditions, a high cell over here, a low cell over here, a amount of precipitation coming from wind system, you get the conditions for a storm that's beyond the normal dimensions. And so that's the origin of this, and obviously the book and the movie refer to that. And so in the Amazon, I think we're facing a similar type of situation where different events, global markets, national markets, investments in infrastructure, demand for commodities, demographic phenomena, governance issues, violence. There's all kinds of things that are going on in the Amazon, and they're all coming together at this point in time to create radical change, which I refer to as a perfect storm of environmental destruction, or at least a potential for that. And so this publication attempts to review this, and perhaps I pick on IIRSA. I was tasked to write about IIRSA, but I think the document really addresses development in the Amazon, or in developing countries, tropical countries in general, and the way that development occurs and how it relates to conservation and the challenges it brings to conservation, but also economic growth and social justice, and all these things are part of the same package. And unless you realize that, our approaches for conservation aren't going to be particularly effective. I start out, many of you have probably already read it, presenting two contrasting scenarios. And these are both positive scenarios in many respects. The utilitarian scenarios, this is what the soybean farmer envisions the Amazon to be, a potential for economic growth, and they actually refer to these things as productive landscapes. I live in Santa Cruz, and some of the social events I go to, or business opportunities that people ask me to go to and talk at. People talk about productive landscapes, and their view of a productive landscape is a soybean field, or an oil palm plantation, or a sugarcane plantation, and they think that changing land use is a positive thing, and in fact the Amazon has a potential for following that particular development pathway, and could end up to be successful at it. Technology is constantly changing. 20 years ago we didn't have soybean varieties that could grow on the Amazon. Today we do. Biofuels is a new type of production system, and the tropical areas have inherent advantages with respect to the production of biofuels, both ecological and physiological. And so this is a potential, and the Amazon could be turned into a giant breadbasket. A lot of the land is arable, and the technology might bring us there. You contrast that to what most of us think it would be an ideal future, the utopian scenario, where somehow or another we manage to harness carbon markets and payment for ecological services. People recognize the value of biodiversity, and the governments that manage the states that occupy the Amazon, with the support of the rest of the world, manage to put together some type of system that also promotes economic growth and creates employment opportunities and addresses these issues of social injustice, so that we actually have a positive outcome where we manage to have a economic growth while at the same time preserving the Amazon. Unfortunately, I think what will happen is neither A nor B, and because of a variety of situations, the lack of good governance and accessibility to credit. If you don't have access to credit, you don't have access to technology. That you won't have necessarily a utilitarian scenario, but you have demographic pressures, political pressures, families, individuals seeking a better life that force them into this deforestation development scenario. And so I think in the future we might not have either one of those two positive scenarios, whether you like one or the other, but we'll end up with kind of continuing ongoing degradation of the Amazon, kind of a rolling process that will actually lead to intense poverty and social injustice. And I think all of us would agree that that's something that's not what we pursue in any way, shape, or form. And so the largest single pressure on the Amazon, well, there's actually two. One is climate change, which I'm not going to talk about because Carlos Nobre is going to talk about it, and he obviously knows more about it than I do. The other is the advance of the agricultural frontier, which is very much linked to IIRSA and the development of highways and transportation infrastructure, but also hydrovias and these types of things, which are bulk transport systems that are being invested in. Because if you grow soybeans in the middle of Mato Grosso, you're at a competitive disadvantage to the farmers in Iowa, and so they need hydrovias so that they can compete on a global scale with the farmers in Iowa or in Argentina that have lower transport costs. And of course, once they get that, then they compete more. That leads to more deforestation, and so there's this kind of synergism up there. And it's all related to other phenomena as well, the logging industry and things like that go along with the highway system, even though they're improving the way they do logging through sustainable logging or so-called sustainable logging. The agricultural frontier is diverse. It's cattle, it's soybeans, it's in the very future going to be biofuel crops. And it involves different types of investors: urban investors, there's national investors, international investors, campesinos who don't have capital to invest except for their own work. There's other phenomena that are related to international commodity markets. The Amazon is this enormous area with huge hydrocarbon potentials. In the last decade, Peru essentially has put out its entire land surface in the eastern Amazon for oil concession. Traditionally, we think of the Andean Piedmont and the Front Range of the Andes as having the highest hydrocarbon potential, but Urucu, that concession out there in the middle of the Amazon, found about 15 years ago, changes our geological perspective. Essentially, the entire western Amazon now is viewed as having a hydrocarbon potential, and it hasn't been explored to any great degree. And so I think in the next decade or 2 decades, we're going to see increasing exploration and production of hydrocarbons from the Amazon, and it could follow the Ecuadorian model, which they built a pipeline, and they built the road next to the pipeline and had massive deforestation through the 70s and 80s that accompanied that development. Or perhaps the Peruvian example, hopefully, which the Brazilians seem to be pursuing in Urucu, where they built the pipeline, but they didn't build the road. And they treated them as offshore oil platforms. One of the equipment and the cargo went in by water, and the people went in by air, and so they've been able to avoid that type of deforestation. Other commodities are important. For instance, the iron ore, copper, bauxite, and all these mineral reserves that characterize the Brazilian Shield and the Guiana Shield. They're strategic minerals. There's also the precious metals like gold and diamond and silver, which are also there. And they have synergistic impacts. They not only need bulk transport systems. The countries, particularly Brazil, but all the countries are interested in developing their metallurgical industries. They don't want to export minerals. All right? They want to produce aluminum from their bauxite so that they can benefit in their automobile or aerospace industries. Well, metallurgical industries consume energy. Well, and you want to process it there where you have the energy. The energy is hydroelectric. So the mining leads to metallurgy. Metallurgy leads to hydropower. Hydropower has an impact. You put a variety of dams on a particular river. You create a hydrovia. The hydrovia lowers transport costs for the soybean farmers. soybean farmers have greater incentives, so they expand their acreage, which pushes the cattle sector further into the forest. So see, all of these things are linked, and that's a little bit why IIRSA it has this it's like giving a monkey adrenaline or a 4-year child chocolate candy, and so it's going to accelerate these processes. And then, of course, there's the biodiversity that the impact that's going to come from these processes, the IIRSA being, emblematic of them, but certainly not the only one. And many of us here in the room are biologists, so this is you all are familiar with this, that the biodiversity in the Amazon is not just randomly distributed out there. There's patterns. In the Andes, local endemism is particularly important. Each one of those dots up there is an area where a particular species is known to exist that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And so when you're thinking about an infrastructure investment, you build a road in there, or a copper mine, or an oil platform, there's a very high probability that any one of those investments will lead to an extinction event because of the importance of local endemism. That's very different than the Amazon, where you have a broader pattern of distribution, where the regional endemism is more pronounced. Each one of those large rivers out there is a barrier to the distribution of some particular some species or a suite of species. And so if we make decisions that, okay, we're going to conserve half the Amazon, and let's choose the western half of the Amazon, well, that still means we're going to have massive extinction, because the distribution of biodiversity in the Amazon is not random. You have these regional patterns. And so whatever strategy we have for conservation has to contemplate this regional patterns of endemism, both in the Andes and in the Amazon. And obviously, you have to deal with the people who live there and understand that development's going to, the whole reason for development, particularly IIRSA, is to improve the standard of living of the populations that live in these countries, and in this instance, in the Amazon. Well, there's, without a doubt, I don't have the slightest doubt that IIRSA is going to bring economic growth and the creation of jobs throughout the Amazon. What I do have a lot of doubt is whether that will benefit the current residents of the Amazon, and if it will be fairly distributed amongst the residents of the Amazon. People who live in the Amazon have a lousy education, they have poor access to health, and many of them live in isolated communities. The opportunities are not equal. And so as you have economic growth, there's going to be lots of migration, and there's migration from urban areas to other urban areas, from rural to urban areas, and from other parts of the world to the Mennonites in Santa Cruz, and Rondonia is populated from farmers from Paraná. And so that you're going to have lots of movement, and there's no reason to assume that the people who live in the Amazon are the ones who are going to benefit from economic growth in the Amazon. And there's other issues, health issues, for instance. If you're going to build highways across the Amazon, you're going to increase the movement of people from one region to the other. And what happened in Africa with people moving along highways and stuff, highways became the arteries for the expansion of AIDS. And so this same type of thing is you're connecting countries and regions that have been isolated for a long time, and kind of lubricating the movement of people. We could have a potential new outbreak of AIDS, as well as malaria is on the upgrade. We're all suffering from respiratory. Anybody who lives in the Amazon has respiratory issues in the months during the burning season. So there's a lot of issues out there that need to be dealt with on the social thing. Now, what to do? Personally, I think IIRSA has a lot of aspects that are visionary. I think it's logical to look for regional integration of their economies. But I ask, why isn't it visionary in all of its components? Why isn't it also visionary with respect to its environmental components? Why isn't it looking to improve conservation? And why do we have to view it as a threat? And so there's a variety of things that I think in the future could be used to improve IIRSA, to make IIRSA a force for good, not necessarily a force for deforestation. And that we have this changing international environment. I think most people here are familiar with what's going on in Bali, and these are some back-of-the-envelope numbers about the value of the carbon in the Amazon forest. If you take just a average hectare of forest, the biomass in it, and turn it into carbon dioxide, and and calculate the value of that on an international market, well, you know, that's a lot of money, between $1 and $10 trillion. That's the value of the standing forest in the Amazon. Now, obviously, nobody's going to pay anybody for conserving forests, but what's coming out of the conversations, I think, in Bali and elsewhere, is that there is going to be a mechanism for compensating countries or communities or perhaps even individuals for reducing emissions from deforestation. Well, if you put a full stop on deforestation in the Amazon tomorrow, and used historical baselines as a reference, that could produce under today's markets this $6.5 billion per year in funds that could be used to promote conservation or to subsidize production systems that were not based on deforestation. Now, obviously, it's impossible to do a full stop of deforestation in the Amazon from one year to the next. But even a gradual reduction produces significant revenues that could be used for these types of the schemes, which some of them are that I describe in the publication, and others here probably are more familiar with some of those, whether it be sustainable logging or fish farming or things like this. And so we need to think about carbon as we go through this, and particularly with respect to IIRSA, we need to think about what the full cost of a highway is. And when they do that full cost accounting, they need to think about what the cost of the carbon replacing those emissions that are going into the atmosphere. Now, Tom Lovejoy talked about the importance of the Amazon and regulating the hydrological systems of the continent. Well, this is the South American low-level jet, which was discovered or described by a group of scientists who were working with NOAA and INPE and the tsunamis, which are based in Bolivia and Paraguay and Peru, the regional meteorological circuits. Basically, it's today in Brazil they're using it's a river in the sky, but it's a water transport system that goes from the Atlantic Ocean, where it's evaporated. The trade winds move it over to the Amazon, where it's recycled through the forest. The winds hit the Andes. All right, the high ones move over the Andes, but most of them are channeled towards the south, parallel the Andes, and then they're pushed out over the River Plate area, which is the country's breadbasket, largest agricultural region. And according to my estimates, again, back of the envelope, has an annual value of $100 billion a year. Well, even a small reduction, we don't have to think about catastrophic reductions in the precipitation, but even a small reduction of that water flow from the Amazon south that would be an almost inevitable consequence of deforestation or climate change that comes about from some other mechanism, which I'm sure Carlos Nobre will tell us about. It would have enormous economic consequences. Just a 1% reduction, $1 billion a year, how many jobs would be lost in southern Brazil and Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, due to that type of ecological impact that would come from the degradation of the Amazon, either by climate change or deforestation. So what can we do to avoid the end of the Amazon? In the last chapter of the document, I share some ideas, and some of them are well known to this group of individuals. They're out there. But first thing we need to do is recognize that the threat to the Amazon comes from two principal sources: climate change, which I haven't touched on because Carlos is going to do it, and deforestation, which we're all particularly aware of. And they feed into each other. And as we have more deforestation, right, we continue to contribute to the risk of climate change. And as the climate continues to change and the Amazon gets warmer and drier, there's the risk of this forest degradation, where the Amazon forest switches from a rainforest to a seasonal forest. Well, a rainforest has about 150 tons of carbon per hectare, and a seasonal forest has about 100 tons of carbon per hectare. So if the Amazon shifts from one ecological system to another due to climate change, all right, we could ratchet up the amount of carbon emissions coming from natural ecosystems, all right, not even mentioning deforestation. This is an enormous risk to the planet. So there's a lot of reasons to conserve the Amazon and to reduce carbon emissions in a fast track because of the risk to the physiological functionality of the Amazon forest. IIRSA, right? We talked about the need to evaluate IIRSA in a larger scale. Instead of just looking at the strip of the highway where they're going to put that particular investment, we need to think about the network of highways. We also need to think about the impact of this network of highways and the development processes in the Amazon on the carbon balance of the planet. And so a few more concrete or hypothetical things that we could do. We need to monetize the ecosystem services provided by the Amazon and implement RED. That's this reduced emissions from deforestation and degradation, which is being discussed now in Bali. And it could improve a significant revenue stream that we could use for subsidizing other types of production systems or for paying for conservation. And we also need to reform the CDM, all right? The CDM, the reforestation, afforestation program has not worked. There's virtually no projects out there. There's a couple that are actually working, and none on an industrial scale where we're subsidizing reforestation. Well, there's 65 million hectares of the Amazon have already been deforested. There's no reason we have to accept that. We can turn that and make it go the other way, but not under the current rules of the Kyoto Protocol and the Clean Development Mechanism. Those need to be reformed. People tell me that you can't for a variety of reasons, but there's got to be some way to subsidize planting of trees instead of penalizing it with bureaucracy. And then there's got to be, hopefully, Brazil and Argentina, probably not, it's unlikely that Argentina will subsidize the conservation of the Amazon, but certainly Brazil needs to recognize the benefits from that hydrological system and think of ways that they organize their national policies to foster the conservation of the Amazon. What do we do with this money when we get it? It's a lot of money. It could be a lot of money. Probably not enough to compete with soybeans and biofuels, but at least enough that we could put up a particularly good defense. And one of those things is to ask the people in the Amazon what they want. If you ask anybody who lives in the Amazon, the woman who lives there in a shack on the side of the road, what her priorities are, and she says, well, health and education for my children. I want a decent education for my child. And I'm sick and I don't have any way to deal with my illness. These are the issues that the people are interested in. And so if we're looking for ways to provide incentive to the residents of the Amazon, linking ecosystem services to health and to human services, to me is a logical way to go about that. But we just can't give them money. All right? From my perspective, I think that'd be a mistake. That's welfare. And if there's one thing I think we've learned in the United States, welfare is a way to entrench poverty. Right? You need to use this money to produce economic opportunity and jobs, all right, that are not linked to deforestation. Deforestation occurs for one simple reason. It generates wealth. All right? I mean, a lot of us like to think that deforestation generates poverty, but it's not true. Deforestation generates wealth. And until you realize that you have to offer people alternatives to deforestation, so that they can support their families or make a buck, all right, and then we're not going to be successful in eliminating deforestation. Carlos Nobre, every time I hear him speak, and I'm sure he's going to mention it up, is there's a need to transform the economy of the Amazon from an export of commodities to a transformational economy where the natural resources of the Amazon or of any of these countries, the Andes or whatever, are converted into goods and services, all right, that are consumed locally and also exported. And so instead of exporting timber, all right, export furniture. Instead of exporting bauxite, export cars. Things like that are a way to improve the economies of these countries in general, and what works for the country also works for the Amazon. There's a lot of opportunities. We can say it's really a bad deal to have this highway that goes from Cuiabá to the Pacific coast and is going to run through the Madre de Dios. But the Madre de Dios has one enormously large natural resource called water. And Mato Grosso is producing soybeans. In the meantime, the fisheries industry in the ocean is collapsing due to overfishing. So there's an economic opportunity there to take advantage of the soybeans that are being produced in Mato Grosso, exporting them to Brazil, where you convert them into fish meal using into fishes, all right, using the natural resource that's found at the base of the Andes, these high precipitation regimes, an intensive production system. A hectare of water, a pond can produce far more protein than 100 hectares of cow pasture. All right, and so an intensive production system that's not dependent upon deforestation takes advantage of the highway, which I wish it wasn't there, but there it is, and the soybeans, which I wish they weren't being grown in the Mato Grosso, but there they are, to produce a new type of production system that is not dependent upon deforestation. And then biofuels, we're all concerned about biofuels, and with good reason, because there's a lot of money out there that's going to be going towards biofuels. But why can't we figure out a way to make biofuels link up with this other business called emissions from deforestation? All right, there's 65 million hectares of deforested land in the Amazon. All right, why can't we think of a mechanism where some of these 65 million hectares is converted to biofuels if and only if it's linked to the conservation, grow 100 hectares of African oil palm, but conserve 1,000 hectares of forest in the same neighborhood. It's a way of stabilizing the agricultural frontier. But we have to stabilize the agricultural frontier, and we have to think of ways to do that. And that's linking forest conservation on that frontier with the production systems on that frontier. And the opportunity for linking biofuels and the RED mechanism, from my perspective, is very interesting. Land tenure is the largest single immediate driver of deforestation in the Amazon, in Bolivia, Peru, wherever. People knock down the forest to acquire land. It's their way of acquiring ownership of land that doesn't have an owner. Individuals who try to conserve forest say, I'm going to almost inevitably lose their land to the person who squats on it and cuts it down. If you look at the borders of indigenous reserves or national parks or protected areas, there's the line. This is open for settlement. This is not open for settlement. It's not because there's park guards out there protecting or indigenous guards out there protecting that particular border, although there might be, and I'm sure they're doing a good job. It's because the settler knows that if he crosses that land, even if he cuts down the forest and puts it up in a house and grows whatever, that land's already been gazetted. He can't acquire title to that land, or she. And so a land tenure, which is this driver of land use change, we need to change it around so that it's a driver of forest conservation. Why should we reward the person who's deforesting and penalize the person or individual or community that's involved in forest conservation? The laws or the regulations should be switched around 180 degrees so the institutions or individuals or communities that are actually conserving forests get their title preferably over the people who are just cutting it down and acquiring it for themselves. And that's a market incentive, really, when you think about it, that you use regulation to manipulate a market so that you're getting to the end that you want. Incentives, if you grow fish farms or whatever, we need to give people access to credit to do that. And why not, link it to land tenure? Okay, here you have a hunk of land next to this highway that's being built. You have 1,000 hectares. Turn 50 hectares into a fish farm, and the rest you keep as forest. And if you keep the rest of the land as forest, we'll give you access to subsidized credit. All right? Where's the credit come from? It comes from this carbon fund that we're creating up here. And so instead of just spending it on conservation projects and we have to invest in schools and et cetera. But some of it could go towards subsidizing production systems, either through tax incentives or through access to subsidized credit, so that they adopt production systems that are not based on deforestation. And then alternative transport systems. Do people want highways or do they want transportation systems? All right. Well, today, if you want to fly from Iquitos to Manaus, you have to fly from Iquitos to Lima, and then Lima de Sao Paulo, or Sao Paulo to Manaus. There's no logical. I mean, it's not logical. It's logical because that's the way the money flows, obviously. But why can't we have an integrated air transportation system in the Amazon? Subsidize it. Why not? And move as much cargo by water and as many people by transportation system. And if you subsidize air transportation systems, you're helping ecotourism, you're improving health care. There's all kinds of benefits that come along with that as well. I guess I've probably gone over my time. I hope I've been able to address the issues and not be too verbose about it. And I'll turn the podium over here to Tom.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. And one thing is very clear. It's just not enough time for this subject matter. And I'm very mindful of our time, so I'm going to immediately turn it over to Mauro and hope that at the end there will be a little time for questions. Mauro.
Let's see if I can deal with this. First of all, thank you, Paulo, for inviting us to be here. I think it's very important to have this debate and this discussion about this, the Amazon, the infrastructure, and a special development. And the contribution of Tim's work is fantastic, because I think that we have the opportunity to have a deep discussion with the countries about the aspects that Tim brings to us. Let's first try to give just a few highlights about IIRSA. And we have a web page, the IIRSA.org, and we have some information there that could be very useful for you, especially when you, many of the documentation in IIRSA is in Spanish. If you, let's see, the first point is that IIRSA is not a mechanism to finance mega infrastructure. IIRSA is not a bank. IIRSA is not. IIRSA is the government, is the countries. The second is not a process for the privatization of public assets. It's not. IIRSA is not an opaque process directed by corporations and international financial institutions to extract South American natural resources. It's not. What is IIRSA? It's a regional dialogue forum, involves the 12 South American countries. IIRSA belongs to them, to promote efficient infrastructure networks in transport, energy, and communication, to strengthen physical integration. And the idea, and is part of the mandate of IIRSA from the presidentials, is through a sustainable development partner. Of course, IIRSA is not perfect. And I'm not the bad guy here, please. IIRSA is built on consensus. This is the most strong. There is no institutional, no law, no. It's a consensus between the 12 countries. This is very important. The responsibility and decisions of each government, and basically is planning, civil works, and foreign affairs ministers involved in the initiative. And the banks that operate in the region conforms the CCT, the TCC is a technical committee to help the countries in these initiatives. The IDB, my colleague from CAF, Francisco Wolff, is here, and from Plata. This is the institutional structure of IIRSA. We have once a year the ministers, they have a meeting, and then we have a very important role of the national coordination, and all the discussion in IIRSA is made in the executive technical groups, the GTs. And we have the technical coordination committee, the 3 institutions, in a secretariat in TAL in Buenos Aires. IIRSA does not work on the specific details concerning every particular project. The focus of IIRSA in the planning process that we had in IIRSA is a group of projects, not a specific project. IIRSA does not work on establishing the technical agenda of the ministry. Each country has their technical agenda. It doesn't work defining the political agenda of each government. Each government goes to the forum and brings its political agenda. IIRSA works on structuring a project portfolio to strengthen integration using planning, territorial planning tools. This is very important. Second, we have a system to follow up the project portfolio, especially the 31 priority projects. The idea is IIRSA is in a space to defining mechanisms to tackle the gaps on regulation. Tim mentioned the idea of air transportation from the Amazon. This is very important, and we can use the space of IIRSA to discuss with the countries and a formula or a mechanism to develop this, because of course we are talking about many of these problems related with regulations and so on. So it's a space is an opportunity to discuss this. And IIRSA works on developing tools and methodology for the project implementation, and we have now developed new methodologies to use in the groups of projects. The focus is group of projects, not isolated projects. This is an innovation in the case of IIRSA. During this 7 years of IIRSA, many other projects, integration projects, appears in the scenario, but it's not part of IIRSA because, in the case of the Venezuela, Brazil, Argentina gas pipeline, we know that the countries are discussing this project, but it's not in IIRSA because NISA needs a consensus from the 12 countries. So this is the strength of IIRSA. Each country decides if he wants to prioritize the implementation of project in IIRSA portfolio. The IIRSA forum never have the mandate to push a project, a specific project. This is the country decision. And which project? And how to finance particular project. Recently, we have the figures about the implementation of the portfolio, and more than 60% of the portfolio in execution is financed by the budget, the governmental budget, not from the CAF or IDB or World Bank, but specifically from the budget. And if it wants to apply IIRSA tools and methodologies, and when? They have, of course, the control. Ourselves from the banks, we help the countries. Of course, we push the idea to use this methodology, and we can see a little bit later. And let me do some propaganda about the IDB. CAF probably will do later. The IDB, first, provide technical advice and expertise. This is important for the country. The idea to have the CCT is not to have a new organ, a new institution to take care of the IIRSA. We help the countries. Provide technical cooperation funds to support the studies needs to preparation of projects. We have the integration fund to finance projects, to preparation, environmental studies, and even SIA studies we can finance by using these funds. Finance particular projects in this portfolio on demand, of course. The IDB is prepare as well CAF to finance projects, depends on demand of the countries. And the studies relate to IIRSA's tools and methodology. And we, in the IDB, we provide the support to produce new videos about IIRSA. Some result since 2000. First, I think that one of the most important thing IIRSA is to the consolidation as a forum where information is shared, where they construct a common vision. This is it's a very important thing that could be more used by put other elements and other themes to discuss in this forum. Definition and implementation of a regional project portfolio, very transparent. IIRSA. You can see in the IIRSA webpage the 507 projects and more until the middle of this year. We'll have a database in the website open for everybody to know where is the project and the cost and all the information about each project of the portfolio. The prioritization of 31 projects. The renewed discussion in sectoral process. This is the difficult part, the regulatory, the institutional things. But we push in terms, we have some good things occurring in South America in terms of border crossing. We have a program to support small and medium enterprise using the post service. It's fantastic. It's an experience from Brazil that share with the other countries. And now we are pushing the roaming system to have a roaming in South America that could, because the roaming exists, but the price, the cost to call from Buenos Aires to Brazil with a cell phone from Brazil is incredible. We have 145 projects in execution or with finance. It's almost 41% of the original portfolio of IIRSA. We developed this new territorial planning methodology, the environment and social evaluation with strategic approach, the methodology of productive integration and logistics, and we are, with the leadership of CAF, developing a GIS network, GeoSur. And we have the new website and audio visual. Let me go into the end of my short presentation. First is the idea that IIRSA, I think that my experience in IIRSA is since 2003, and I feel that IIRSA, the space, the forum IIRSA is fantastic for the countries because they combine the effort of each one in IIRSA and they use these new methodologies and tools enrich the individual contribution of each country. This is important because the sum is more than the. Okay, Paulo Sotero showed me the time is over. Yeah, IIRSA is helping countries to gradually construct a new vision of planning and implementation of regional infrastructure. This is an example in the Amazon hub. The new strategic vision that we present last year in 2007, changed the idea of bioceanic corridor to a more complex use of the waterway, a backbone to the communication of local communities. And this is the sum of the important things that we have in the strategic vision of the Amazon hub: sustainable and certified forest management, development of bioindustry and biocommerce, export of new Amazon's product, through sustainable practice, the provision of environment service, in the same line that Tim is pointed in his document, the idea. And the most important thing is the countries, especially in the Amazon, they think and use the waterway, and we have the air transport for people too, and because they need roads to connect to the waterway. So if you go to the Eje del Amazonas, the Amazon hub, we see the idea when the countries decide to group projects, they see the possibility to combine roads to waterways, airports, and I can go many water ports in the portfolio of Amazon Hub. Let's see the idea of we have to 2010 4 objectives, strategic objectives, and let's see just a few highlights about the methodology. We developed in 2007 we consolidated 2 new methodologies. One is the IIRSA for environment strategic impact methodology, and then the integration of productive chain and logistic, and the idea is this year to start using this methodology. First movement is to have 5 workshops to training the government, professionals from the government in this new methodology. Special because we are trying to push and to have the allies in the Ministry of Planning, in the Ministry of Transportation and Civil Works. Let me conclude. This is let me just few conclusions follow. First, in the document of Tim, he stated that IIRSA is motivated by the very real need to promote economic growth and reduce poverty among its member countries. But he alerts us about the impact of these projects in the environment, and we do not disagree, of course. The point is how to promote economic growth in South America with sustainability. In this sense, I think that Tim brings to discussion a fundamental question: the importance to develop market mechanisms to deal with the environmental degradation motivated by the economic forces in the global capitalism. This is, I think, a real contribution in the debate. And this question is part of the agenda of the IIRSA, and we are working together, countries and the banks, to improve the quality of IIRSA projects portfolio and to seek a proper balance among economic, social, and environmental impacts. IIRSA could be seen as an opportunity to improve the quality of public policies and the integration process. And as I mentioned before, Tim's work is a great contribution to the debate and the discussion of South American integration. Thank you so much.
So Gustavo and Tim. So what I would like to do is just open this to the audience for a few questions here. And because I, in fact, am giving a talk at 10 minutes to 2 in a different place, Paolo, with all his usual energy and flair, will preside over the end of this. But a question. Or is yes. And please identify yourself.
John Williamson. I would like to ask Mr. Killeen what he makes of the Brazilian government's present program in terms of, like Familia Bolsa. I mean, on the one hand, that is a welfare transfer to the families. On the other hand, it's conditional on giving, on the family making use of the education and health facilities that are there. And so my question is, what does he make? Does he think that this is a good thing? Is it helping? Is it a constructive way of using the funds? Or on the contrary, does it fall in his category of welfare to be rejected?
Okay, to make sure I understand the question, this is where this is where they provide a financial incentive to the family to keep their children in school. Right, right. Well, we have a similar thing in Bolivia, actually. I'm not that familiar with the results of the Brazilian initiative, but what we read in the newspapers is successful, that families keep their children in school longer because of that, and so it's an effective transfer of. I mean, it is a type of welfare payment, right? But it's one that's linked to a particular outcome, which I think everybody can be in favor of, which is to improve the educational capacity of the poor segment of society. We have a similar thing in Bolivia, and it's receives a lot of support.
Question?
I'm Floriano Filho, Fulbright congressional scholar here. I wonder if IIRSA is also working to integrate educational and health systems in those countries, and that's connected to some of the points Tim made here, and also if it's trying to take any advantage of the carbon trade discussions that have been going on recently.
No, IIRSA is focused in energy, transport, and communication. And now with the new methodologies, we are probably will see other programs related with the investment in infrastructure that could be complement the investment. So, but in the moment, IIRSA is focused on the infrastructure projects, different from Pamplona, Panama, in the Central America and Mexico. That the Pamplona, Panama, I understood that they have an agenda of education and other areas than infrastructure.
John?
Thanks. John Redwood from the World Bank. Just two quick questions for my good friend Mauro. Tom, at the very beginning, pointed out that the problems back in the 1970s and 80s in Rondônia and Mato Grosso in particular were very much a function of road development, new roads, and then also mentioned roads between western Brazil and Peru to get to the Pacific. Mauro, you did not specifically mention IIRSA's take, if you like, with respect to road transportation. And then secondly, Tim brought out this very important issue of the potential impact of climate change on agro-industrial production in the Cerrado in Brazil and then further south into the northern parts of Argentina and so on, suggesting that if impacts from road and other types of infrastructure investment are as serious as they were back in the 70s and 80s in Rondônia and Mato Grosso, this could eventually have very significant undermining impacts on a major part of the regional economies, both in central Brazil and in Argentina and elsewhere. And I wondered also if IIRSA has taken a view on that.
John, I think that the use of this new methodology in the groups of projects will show the countries a new view about the impact of these projects in the territory. And of course, in June of this last year, I distributed to the countries the document that the team's document to the. I asked the Secretariat to give to the countries the document, but we didn't have the opportunity to discuss this. And I think that this year, 2008, could be a very, very good moment to discuss, and even to have. I'm thinking now to have a combined event with OTCA and IIRSA to discuss this document and all the impacts related with the projects, infrastructure projects in the Amazon. But I think that we have in IIRSA a saying that IIRSA é processo em consistência crescente. I don't know how to translate to English, but it's very important concept in here. It's a gradually construction of a common view about the development.
Yeah. Yes, please.
My name is Patricia Biermeyer at Georgetown University. My question is for Mr. Marcondes. What are the safeguard policies that IRCA or IDB is putting forth just to support this the social component within the Amazon for this new possible bio corridor or the flux of or the impact of new infrastructure? What are the safeguard policies? Anything beyond what the bank is normally supporting?
No. Let's separate things. One, the banks, the IDB specifically, invest or finance a project, specific project. We apply all the policies that we have, but in general, IIRSA is a planning process. It's not a specific project. But probably, if the Brazil, for instance, would like to have some program in social area in Amazon and ask the bank to finance, of course the bank will see. And the other thing is Brazil, in the case of IIRSA, ask in one specific GTR, the Amazonia, to be the first group to be analyzed, to be applied the IIRSA methodology was the group number 6, the Amazon group. I don't have here, and of course when we apply this methodology, we identify some complementary programs that will be important for the group of projects. Of course, we'll see to how to finance.
No, one final question, the lady there, because we have to sustain ourselves by eating.
Hopefully this won't take too long. I'm Amy Rosenthal from the Amazon Conservation Association, and my question is for Tim Killeen or whoever else would like to respond. I was wondering if you could let us know about any drawbacks, if you see any, of hitching the Amazon conservation wagon to carbon finance in the future.
No.
That's all?
I would love to hear them. That's what this is about. This is an opportunity to voice those. I can see lots of drawbacks from biofuels, for instance. That's obvious, no? The business with carbon markets depends on how it's structured, no? And so there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of money. It could be a lot of money. I stress it can't beat soybeans or biofuels on a per hectare basis over time. No, we won't win that particular thing. So it has to be used very strategically to manipulate the market, if you want to put it that way, or if you're a dreamer, to improve governance to the point that the rules and regulations are enforced fairly. And so This is then there's all these issues of sovereignty. We can have wonderful ideas up here in Washington about how to go about this, or in an NGO, but in the final analysis, it's the Brazilian government or the Bolivian Congress or Hugo Chavez or whoever is going to decide how their individual countries are going to allow that particular mechanism to be implemented.
Just quickly to comment on this and probably leave the conversation here. Maybe we can provoke IIRSA into actually trying to look at this question, because coming out of Bali on this issue of carbon markets and reduced emission from deforestation, what you can see is that Brazil has a particular position, Bolivia has a different position, Colombia has a different position, Venezuela wants to take it to another level. So that debate's not being coordinated in any way, and that, of course, prevents some opportunities to really emerge. Given the fact that a lot of these assets will be affected and will be valued or undervalued by what we saw this here today, maybe IIRSA can provide that space, given that you have the governments linked, and it becomes a new issue that you could take a look at.
Well, thank you very much. Lunch is served across the hallway, and you have access to it if you promise me that you are going to be back here in 45 minutes.